So again, the idea is that we're connecting together here to repeat, get our heads around the concept of oligarchy until we can know the mode of operation and how it exists, the things that they aren't talking about on television, the things they're not talking about at the university. See how it functions, look at its genealogy. Until we can do that, the deep state's just going to be a throw out concept. Again, without precision or consensus in terms of how it's used. Once we can bring those two concepts together, we'll have a real sense of what's going on in the world. And again, we're not a limited hangout here. We want to name names, get to it, find an agenda. The big purpose of this, and I believe the big purpose of learning, is how we fit into this mentally, physically, and spiritually. So let's move on. We were talking about C. Wright Mills, the power elite. We talked about Roosevelt and how she described in 1961 essentially the same concept. She called it the establishment. And she finished her concept by saying not only is this essentially a legitimate mafia that's really at work here in America, Edith Kermit Roosevelt, but she said most people can see that something is wrong, but they can't quite put their finger on it. And this always reminds me of when election cycles come around and you try to hear people have meaningful conversations. After all, we're told it's a government for and by the people, and we're people or citizens, and nothing really is there that we can sink our teeth in. Nothing really feels meaningful to us. And that's what she's getting to. The fact that, again, this idea of a deep state, there's a state within a state, a visible government and an invisible government. And where I believe this really gets together is the next thinker we're going to talk about, 1971, 72, depending on which publication you're looking at. Gary Allen is going to pick up on that same idea that people know there's something wrong but can't quite put their finger on it. He actually, I believe in his first edition, had one of those little children's cartoons where you know something's wrong, but until you shift your lens and shift your perspective, you can't make sense of that focus. And what he's alluding to is what I've suggested from the get-go. The materials were given at universities, specifically in political science departments. The idea that we're supposed to explain outcomes through the democratic process. The idea that most decision-making occurs at the state level for the good of the citizens of the state. The idea that history is sort of the unraveling of accidental market forces and that people have full information and are empowered to make decisions that make a difference. We're finding a lot of scholarly material that runs against that, that's excluded from the conversation at the university, that's excluded largely in a coherent way from media and popular discussion. So we're really trying to understand, again, why events are unfolding in the world today and what that means for us. So what is Gary Allen talking about here in 1971? Well, we're going to get around to this for our question for today. Does this have any resonance for us here in 2017? Listen to this. Gary Allen is talking about the election cycle. Yet, despite high hopes and glittering campaign promises, the problems continue to worsen no matter who is in charge in Washington, D.C. Each administration, whether Republican or Democrat, continues the same basic policies of the previous administration, which it had so thoroughly denounced. During the election cycle, in politics, we call that the median voter theory, that they kind of start out on the edges. It looks like this time it might be a little exciting. By the time of the general debate, it's kind of tweedledee, tweedledum. And in a larger sense, what we're talking about again is this idea of a Washington consensus, that over the last 80 years, if you track consistently and empirically the outcome of the policies that really matter to America, monetary policy, finance policy, currency policy, trade policy, education policy, the policies that industrialized America and then deindustrialized America, what you're going to find is that there is not even negligible, there is no statistical differences between right and left. So those are the two choices we're given. People hold their nose oftentimes and pick the lesser of two evils. But what we're learning here is that let's frame the lens on what we're looking at, and maybe a new picture will come into view. So Alan continues in this work. It is considered poor form to mention this. Oh, don't I know? But it is true, nevertheless. Statistically, empirically true, yes. Is there a plausible reason to explain why this happens? That we get the same outcomes regardless of administration? Is the government formed by the people and the people are largely not happy with the outcome? Is there a reason? We are supposed to think it is all accidental. There you go, the accidental theory of history, and coincidental. And therefore, there is nothing we can do about it. Through that lens of seeing everything through democracy that happens primarily at the nation-state level, for the nation-state level, the unrolling of history, and we just the consumers, this is what we get. This is the government we deserve. And he's saying, no, there's something else at work here. And he's alluding to the deep state. This is sort of before Peter Scott Dale would innovate the term, but the term, whether we call it the parallel government or the deep state or the state within the state or the security state, it's been around as long as there's been states. And I, again, am inviting us to look at this through the lens of oligarchy, and that's what he's talking about here. So I invite you to look at this. I wish I had been exposed to this work 20 years ago. So much would have fallen into my view. The book is called None Dare Call It Conspiracy.